Welcome to a special signing day edition of Recruiting Blitz. I'm Tim Verghese, joined by Steve Marik. Steve, we got a lot to get to. Some headlines from today. One big flip, one almost flip that didn't happen, and some coaching news as well. It's been one of those weeks. But how are you doing? Signing day, a lot going on this week. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, not a lot of sleep these days, but who needs sleep anyway? The news is flying fast right now and a little difficult to keep up with everything. But yeah, Rule talk today inside Hawks Championship Center in downtown Lincoln. And yeah, it was a loaded press conference because there was a lot to talk about. He was answering as much as he could. So top of the chart, I guess, was the news about Tony White, the defensive coordinator. We've confirmed, and he's changed his Twitter profile to Florida State stuff already. So he's headed to Tallahassee. But yeah, that was kind of the big news that needed to be talked about and was talked about early.
Yeah, talked about that, and then today we got the confirmation that Terrence Knighton is also following. White headed down to Tallahassee as well. We're already seeing somewhat of the impact of that through the transfer portal. I guess for you, how surprised are you, if at all? Like for me personally, I'm not, but are you surprised at all Nebraska's been able to keep this class, specifically the defensive class, together amidst this turnover?
Yes, I am. And that speaks a lot to Matt Rule's recruiting ability and what he has built so far through his 2 seasons at Nebraska about like what his program is about and kind of selling that to these kids who are looking for a home to play football at. I mean, I think it's a very strong pitch. I think Matt Rule has a lot going, a lot of positive stuff going on right now in his program, even though on the outside to the fan base, it maybe looks like things are on fire, but this is just the way it's going to be every single offseason now. Every single program across the country is going through this right now. Coaches are leaving, they're coming. Players are going and coming, so it's just going to be like this every single season. So fans better get used to it, and media members better get used to it now. So, but yeah, with White moving on and Pot Roast moving on, it is impressive that these kids still signed and are going to be early enrolling and playing at Nebraska next season, because there's some really talented recruits in this 2025 class that could have easily gone elsewhere. So very impressive to keep this class intact.
For sure, credit to Rule, but also credit to Nebraska's recruiting efforts and what they've done under Rule. It's an effort. Rule mentioned it today, but there's an effort from the top down to make sure that every one of these recruits that come on campus have multiple relationships on campus. Talking Dawson Merritt, for example, the four-star linebacker out of Kansas City, on top of Matt Rule, on top of Tony White, it was linebackers coach Rob Dvoracek that ultimately played the biggest role in him coming to Nebraska. Jamar Mosey, a guy with a lot of Kansas City area ties, played a big role in that recruitment. Keith Williams played a big role in that recruitment. But Christian Jones, the strength staff, played a big role in that recruitment. On top of linebackers coach Rob Dvoracek, on top of Christy Coggin. So it's multiple levels, and Nebraska's done a really good job, and you see that from guys that when they visit, how many different assistants are surrounding them, how many relationships are being built. You talk to recruits, guys that have committed and are considering Nebraska, and you ask them just who's your best relationship at Nebraska, and they list off name after name. Nebraska is well set up to maintain momentum and keep this thing rolling, even when coaching turnover does hit like it is currently. Um, Another coaching news on the flip side of things announced today. Matt Rule or Dana Holgerson, I guess, is the one that made the call. But Dackel Shorts joining Nebraska as the wide receivers coach, or Dackel Shorts, I apologize, but Dackel Shorts joining Nebraska as wide receivers coach, replacing Garrett McGuire, who is exploring his options, could remain on staff, could go somewhere else. But he will no longer be the receivers coach specifically at Nebraska. It's going to be DeKell's position. DeKell comes from one season at Kentucky. Before that, he was with Dana Holgerson at Houston. Kind of helped develop Tank Dell, helped develop Matthew Golden, helped develop Samuel Brown and Joseph Manjack. Across the 2 years that he oversaw Tank Dell's career, Tank Dell led the country in total receiving yards across those 2 years.
Yeah, he's a stud. Tank is a stud, and when we were talking about this, Tim, kind of off the podcast and everything, we were talking about just the vision of DeKel coming in and coaching receivers in a Dana Holgerson offense, you can't help but make the comparison. And Tim, you were the first to say this of Tank Dell and Ja'Cory Barney. So just Tim, talk about that. Why did you think Tank Dell is such a good comparison for what Ja'Cory Barney can do and become?
Yeah, I mean the yeah, it's easy to just point to South Florida guys, both slight of frame, but it's the way they move. With Tank Dell, it's he runs routes at such an impressive level just because his change of direction ability, his shiftiness, and you see Ja'Cory Barney has some of that stuff as well. They're both tougher than they look. Again, both on the slider side, wiry, strong though, can run through some contact. We saw that with Barney, just taking hit after hit and popping up. Tank Dell, same thing, is one of those guys that can surprisingly run through contract for a guy with a slight frame. There's just a lot of similarities there, both and also like the routes they're effective on, where they play on the field, and again long term ability and long term potential, how they can affect an offense. I think you're going to see Ja'Cory Barney used very similarly to how Dana Holgerson used Tank Dell in his 2 years at Houston.
You could tell when Dana was talking about Ja'Cory Barney, he loved him. I mean, you could just see, close your eyes, imagine what 2025 season is going to look like at Nebraska with Dana Holgerson calling the offense, and Ja'Cory Barney Jr., like he was as a true freshman this past season, is going to be a huge, huge piece of it. But Tim, let's start talking about this recruiting class that Matt Rule signed today. I think all of them signed today. But yeah, what are your overall thoughts? I mean, it was. Do you want to start off with Jeremiah Jones?
Yeah, so 20 for 20, which at one point didn't look like they were going to go 20 for 20. Obviously
Yeah.
started off the morning with a few signees announcing Christian Jones and Dawson Merritt were the first two in the class. Anyone that was worried about their commitment status, they were the first to sign their name and submit their paperwork. Then Nebraska got a big flip. Cortez Mills, four-star wide receiver, flipped him from Oklahoma out of Homestead, Florida. Had a really productive junior season, helping lead his program to a state title appearance. And as a senior, dealt with some injuries, but in 5 games, still neared 500 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. Just I mean, again, talking to people across the country, talking to people that have seen him and have seen the top receivers in this class. I've seen some of the top receivers in this class. He's got a very good case to be the best 50-50 ball catcher in this class, which you don't say
Wow.
often for a guy that's 6'1", 6'2". Like not
Yeah.
not a big body by any means, not a 6'3/6'4" type receiver. But you throw it up to him and he's coming down with it. We saw that time and time again on the 7-on-7s trail. You see that all over his junior film. You see that in his senior film. Just a reliable, safety blanket, like where, and a guy that I think Dylan Raiola is really excited to play with. And, and you think about that recruitment, Dylan Raiola has been talking to that kid since the spring every single day. Even earlier, since Dylan committed and had an idea of who Nebraska was going after in 2025, Cortez Mills was arguably his top offensive target in this class. And Nebraska gets him. Nebraska flips him from Oklahoma. And now he's going. I think he's going to have a chance to contribute in the same way Ja'Cory Barney did within the offense.
One recruit that was not in the class, Michael Terry out of Texas. What happened there?
Yeah, tough one for Nebraska. It's they invested a lot of energy and a lot of resources into that recruitment. Obviously, we've been tracking this since before the spring. Nebraska was one of the first schools to show interest, one of the first to offer, made him a priority early on. Texas came on strong in the spring once they started to make him a priority. And in the summer, Texas surged and Texas seemed like the leader through the summer. There was points, at the end of the summer and through in the midseason where Texas kept trying to get him to shut it down, but there was just something about Nebraska that kept Nebraska in it, that kept him from committing. Ultimately, it's just the unknown with Garrett McGuire's status that didn't help. And you have to wonder, not with just with Michael Terry, but some of these other targets, how much a couple more wins this season could have helped Nebraska on the trail. Because for Terry, ultimately what sold him on Texas, and I'll say this up right now, I've said this a couple of different places. This was not an NIL recruitment. NIL was not the ultimate factor in this recruitment. It ultimately came down to gut feel and where he felt best. Texas has a tradition of producing some of these type of receivers, and they are also in the national championship hunt. They were in the playoff last year. They're going to be in the playoff this year, and or more than likely going to be in the playoff this year. And for him, he can see a path to playing in and being in contention for a championship in his college career. That vision isn't as clear as at Nebraska, but he gave Nebraska every chance. So we'll see what happens. And it's one of those things. Nebraska's done a really good job there, good enough that I think if down the line Michael Terry were to enter the transfer portal, I'd expect Nebraska to be the favorite.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you never know these days. I mean, I mean, it's just a way of life right now. If you sometimes you feel like you lose a kid, on signing day, you never know. Next season, the next transfer portal opportunity, you might be able to get another shot at him, too. So, but Tim, let's take a look at this, Husker 2025 recruiting class. Out of everybody on there, who's your eye always drawn toward? Who are you really kind of interested in and think very very highly of? Maybe somebody who could see some time early.
Yeah, Dawson Merritt. I just think that's a guy that we went to go see him live early this fall. Just a difference maker. Flies around the field. A guy that you believe it or not didn't really intend on playing football growing up, despite his
Yeah.
dad obviously the
Hmm.
defensive backs coach for the Kansas City Chiefs, also coached for the Giants. Has basically been an NFL lifer as a coach. Never for Dawson, going into high school, he thought he was going to play basketball, and then he started to take football a little more seriously. Broke out on the scene as a junior, and then you can see the jump he made from junior year to senior year. He spent the entire offseason with his dad, watching film, learning how to watch film, learning how to like read the field as a linebacker. You can see, obviously with his dad, he's got some natural cover skills. Super athletic. He just flies around the field, and a guy that likes to hit, likes to punish. I think Nebraska, again, I've said this multiple times, but I really like Nebraska's linebacker class that they put together between Merritt, four-star in-state linebacker Christian Jones, and three-star in-state linebacker Pierce Newberry. Steve, how about you? You keep watching this class and looking at this class. Is there someone that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, and he's a guy who isn't really talked about a lot, but I think everybody kind of understands that he's going to be good. Cade Peterjack, at a North Dakota Cheyenne High School in West Fargo, 6'5". I think he's hovering around like 260 pounds right now. So he's going to come to Lincoln, ready to rock and roll. I think he just reminds me of a Riley Van Poppel type guy, a Ty Robinson type guy, just a tough, dude in the middle who could play on the interior. He could play on the edge. Heck, he could even turn into like a jack linebacker, have him stand up in a 2 point stance and go to work and rush a passer. So I mean, there is such. I just really love the idea of a Cade Peter Jack out there. He just kind of speaks. He just kind of looks like a Nebraska Cornhusker, defensive lineman, like what the staff wants them to look like. I mean, I wrote it. I wrote it in a little thing up on Inside Nebraska today. Violent dude, heavy-handed. His moves look very very powerful right now, and they're only going to continue to get better as he cleans up the technique stuff, gets bigger and stronger. But he's already coming here big and strong. I mean, I love the look of K. Peterjack, in the past, I know Terrence Knighton's not going to be the defensive line coach at Nebraska next season, but I mean, true freshmen have played, for the Huskers the past 2 seasons on the defensive line. Keona Davis this season, Riley Van Poppel last season, Principal Umam Yellen, who has since entered transfer portal. He got some true freshman reps. Cam Lenhart also got some true freshman reps 2 seasons ago. So the path is there to play if you do the work and you impress in practice. And so I think Cade Peterjack is one of those guys who the potential to do that is high. I'm very, very high on Cade Peterjack.
For sure. That whole D line class, like that, I
Yeah.
really think they did a good job of bringing in guys, and maybe they saw the writing on the wall. Maybe it's just how you build a program. And I agree with it regardless. With some of the the departures you've seen in the transfer portal, all three of these guys held status depending on Tyson Terry, who's dealing with an injury. All three of these guys, Tyson Terry, Malcolm Simpson, and K. Peterjack, all three have the ability to play early at Nebraska and will arrive on campus physically in the condition ready to play. Simpson and Peter Jack could probably use some weight. Tyson Terry needs some time to probably get his body in the right shape, but that it takes one off season. It takes a spring, And I'm excited for all three. I know people make light of the competition Peter Jack plays up in North Dakota, but they won the state championship, and I'll say this too. You watch his film. that first step he's got, that's uncoachable. That's
It's
something you just
explosive.
can't. Yeah, you can't coach that first step he has off the line, and that's going to translate regardless of competition. A guy that can get off the line as quick as he does, that plays with the violence he does, that's going to translate. Of course, there's going to be a little bit of a transition period for him to adjust to the speed of the college game. But yeah, I think the sky's the limit for Peter Zach and that whole defensive line room. That front seven group, I think overall, very impressed with the group that Matt Rule and Rob Dvoracek and that whole staff has put together. And I'll say this, and again with Terrence Knighton, again I don't know exactly how this all went down behind the scenes. And obviously he's off to Florida State. Props to him for sticking through signing day to make sure these guys made it to Lincoln.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was, tough situation there, timing. I mean, it is a business after all. So, but listening to Terrence talk about his recruits, it really seems like he cares about them. And just because he's leaving the program for a different opportunity, it doesn't mean that he doesn't care about these kids. He absolutely does. And he made a real impact on them. So it's a tough situation all around. But at the end of the day, I think everybody in this situation understands that it's a business. And that's really all it is. And guys are going to come and go, even more so now in this new landscape of college football. But Tim, do you have another recruit outside of the ones that we have mentioned that you're kind of really interested in?
Yeah, offensively, Isaiah Mosey, another just Kansas City
Yeah.
area kid, committed, flip from Oregon to Nebraska over the summer. Another guy that just projects to, like Cortez Mills, is play early in the offense at receiver. And you watch him at the high school level, how many different ways he impacts the game. He had
Mm-hmm.
3 punt return touchdowns as a senior. Play some running back, play some receiver, combined for over 1,000 all-purpose yards this year, despite missing a couple of games with an injury. He's a guy that I think you can line up in the slot, you manufacture touches for, you can line him up in the backfield. We saw Nebraska kind of mess around with some of those two back sets here at the end of the season. I think we're going to
Mm-hmm.
see more of that from Dana Holgorsen. We saw him use Ja'Cory Barney a little bit back there. I don't know if you really want Ja'Cory Barney taking handoffs,
Yeah.
between the tackles, but Isaiah Mosey absolutely can. That's a guy that's 6'1", 6'2" ish, 185 ish pounds right now, and his lower base is thicker than you'd expect. Like he's got a running back lower base, a lower body, and a guy that can run through some contact. His most impressive trait to me, his elusiveness with the ball in his hands. He's so
Yeah.
good at breaking tackles, evading contact, finding green grass, and maximizing the yards he can get. I think he's got a really good opportunity at Nebraska to contribute early, and Nebraska will need it from Mills and Mosey. They'll need both those guys to step up pretty early in their career.
I'm glad you mentioned Isaiah Mosey's size, and I'm glad you mentioned what he can do with the ball in his hands after the catch because um, so Nebraska football pro they put on like a signing day show like they usually do. And it starts early in the morning when the paperwork starts coming in. And Garrett McGuire was the one who actually talking about Isaiah Mosey, and he said that he was already up to close to 200 pounds. And so that just kind of like tells you how serious these kids are these days about coming in ready to go right away. And I totally agree with you, Tim, how you could the potential to is out there to use somebody like Isaiah Mosey in different ways. It kind of reminded me, like watching his tape, it kind of reminded me a little bit of a Jaden Doss type feel over there at Ray Peck and in Missouri. But yeah, I mean Isaiah Mosey's
Much
a
better
great
athlete
pick.
than Doss, and that's no
Oh yeah,
disservice to Doss. It's just
and
how
Doss
much
is
better of
really
an
yeah
athlete Mosey
yeah.
is.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of fun ways that somebody like Dana Holgerson is going to use Isaiah Mosey, and having his dad on staff too is going to help things that transition as well. But if I had to go with another one, Tim, let's talk about Jamarian Parker. Yeah, just a St. Louis kid, and EJ Barthel was talking about during his recruitment, he was in St. Louis and talking to different high school coaches, and everybody kept mentioning that same name, Jamarian Parker. Jamarian Parker. He's the dude in this city. And so EJ Barthel started, recruiting him and started ramping up the recruiting efforts with Jamarian Parker. Wound up getting him, and he said that the goal for Jamarian Parker is just to kind of get as close to 200 pounds as he can right now, because I think he's a little around like 180, 185 pounds at about 6 feet right now. What Jamarian Parker brings is exactly what Matt Rule and EJ Barthel talked all season about is trying to get more explosive at the running back position, especially with that breakaway speed. And that is exactly what Jamarian Parker brings to the table. He at least did in his high school season, and he's going to be relied on to do that same thing at the Big Ten level. I'm just very excited about Jamarian Parker. He's a guy that I didn't think Nebraska might have held on to, but they sure did, and he's going to be here in Lincoln. And he's that guy with that breakaway speed that Nebraska just talked about all season long. They didn't have that. We need a guy like that. Jamarian Parker is just that. Tim, what do you know about Jamarian Parker? As I understand, he rushed for a lot of yards senior year.
Cleared 1,500 yards as a senior, and this is one that Nebraska had to fend off some people. Like obviously,
Yeah.
um, they had to fend off USC, Alabama, TCU. He was an Arkansas commit at one point, so it was a lot of people in that mix there, and Nebraska won him over in the summer and has kept him through the fall. Even amidst his senior season, there were some talks about what a good senior year could do for his recruitment. Could it ramp things back up? Credit to EJ Bartel, credit to the staff, credit to Keith Williams, keeping him in the boat and getting him on campus. The one question with me for him is going to be, can he run between the tackles at the Big Ten level? We just need to see
Yep.
him add that size, get to that size where he can take some of that contact you're going to face in the Big Ten and face some of those bigger bodies you're going to face. But yeah, that top end speed is there, and I think they've got a nice little lightning and thunderish combo between him and
Mm-hmm.
and Connor Booth, who again I'll say on Connor Booth, like man, he rushed for nearly 3,000 yards as a
Yeah,
senior.
he did. With
Like
and he played through a knee injury for most of the season as well.
right. And you look at him and you watch his tape and you're like, okay, well, he's playing Class C2 competition in Nebraska. The thing about it is you can't control who you play. You ultimately have to play who's in front of you. And there
Mm-hmm.
were some that felt he should have maybe transferred up to Class A or transferred somewhere else as a senior. And it's just he wanted to finish out his senior year, his high school career with his friends, with his boys. Who can blame him? And he broke records along the way. He tied the 11-man touchdown record, rushing touchdown record, with
Mm-hmm.
50 rushing touchdowns as a senior. Absurd statistics.
Can you even do that like in an NCAA video game right now,
I
like
don't even
during a
know. And
season?
and keep in
It
mind,
might be hard.
he did not play most of the
Yeah.
entirety of any of the games this year because they blew out practically every opponent behind his rushing his legs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, he's a guy that he's 6'2", 210, obviously dealing with that injury, so we'll see, kind of what his recovery is. Also going to play baseball at Nebraska,
Yeah.
but he produced the way you would want a power four player to produce against the level of competition he did. I think a lot of the traits he has are projectable. I think his elusiveness, I think his ability, his vision, see working through, some of the mess at the line of scrimmage, to find that open field, and break away. I think that's impressive. His ability to throttle down and throttle up, I think he's a guy that he plants his foot and he goes. He sees green grass, he plants his foot,
Yep.
he's gone. You see that in his junior tape, you see that in his senior tape. Yeah, I think Nebraska. We talked a lot of the wide receivers and running backs. They put together a really good offensive group, in my opinion, and I think we can't get off this call without talking about TJ Latif. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know
Mm-hmm.
when Latif's going to play necessarily. He's coming in fully understanding that Dylan Raiola is the quarterback as long as Dylan Raiola is here. And but to his credit, he had a damn good senior season, playing
Mm-hmm.
in arguably the toughest league in the country, in the
Mm-hmm.
Trinity League out in California. And that's not don't listen to this. He didn't just play in the Trinity League, playing against Mater Dei, playing against St. John Bosco, playing against Servite, playing against Junipero Serra, playing against some of the best programs in California. He also played against Bishop Gorman, the powerhouse program out of Las Vegas. He also beat St. Francis Academy, the powerhouse program out of Baltimore. This is a kid that is coming to Nebraska having played the best competition you can possibly find at the high school level, and he shined.
Yeah, I mean, and now he's going to be coming to Nebraska and playing as a Cornhusker, and so that kind of transitions us to what Matt Rule said about the quarterback room. Not much was said today about Dylan Raiola, but it didn't really need to. But there was some Heinrich Haarberg talk, and Matt Rule said that there was a commitment from the coaches to Heinrich Haarberg that Heinrich Haarberg would focus elsewhere at than quarterback. So Heinrich Haarberg for the 2025 season will be playing something else other than quarterback. As of right now, that's the plan. But I think that kind of speaks to their confidence and what they think of TJ Lateef. And right now with Nebraska's quarterback room with Daniel Kalen hitting the transfer or going to be hitting the transfer portal when it opens. The future is still unclear with Jalen Gramstad. We'll have to just keep an eye on that. But TJ Lateef has the opportunity to come in here and learn and develop and be that number 2 right away, right?
Right. Yep, for sure. And I think he's a guy that's going to have a chance to come in and compete immediately for that backup spot.
Yep.
Could very much be the QB2 on the depth chart when we're sitting here talking about Nebraska's depth chart here in a year or so.
Yeah, absolutely. One more question I have for you, Tim. Just looking at Nebraska's list right now, commitment list. Christian Jones. Let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball. How close could he be to seeing rotation snaps at inside linebacker or wherever Rob Dvorak chooses to platoon him? How ready is he for playing right now as a true freshman?
I think he's going to have that opportunity to play pretty early. I mean,
Yeah,
man, not even rotational stats, man. He could compete for a
yeah.
starting job because there's spots
Considering
open.
who's leaving that room,
Yep.
yeah, they're going
John
to need
Bullock's
some
gone.
bodies.
Makai
Yep.
Bear's gone. There's snaps to be had in that room, and I think him and Dawson Merritt are going to make a play for those snaps. Jones entering this senior season straight up was like, I'm going to stick at the weight I'm at because I'm pretty much at college ready weight right now. I don't need to
Mhm.
add anything, and he naturally put on weight through the season. He looked significantly bigger by the end of the year than he did at the beginning. I definitely added a good 5 to 10 pounds across the course of the season. Uber productive at 93 tackles as a senior on the inside of that West Side defense. And I really thought he put together a lot of his traits as a senior. My big concern with him from junior season going into senior year was you could see the athleticism. He's got a 10-8 speed in the 100-meter dash.
Mhm.
He's throwing 50 feet in shot put. Ridiculous strength and speed for his size. But you didn't always see that translate on the field. It often felt like he wasn't playing with 10-8 speed. He wasn't playing with that strength. He was an effective linebacker, but he wasn't playing like that. As a senior, you saw it all really come together where he's pairing his instincts with his athleticism, reading quarterbacks' eyes, reacting to the football, closing in on ball carriers, just he's a disruptive force. And everywhere I saw him 3 times this season. Every time I saw him, he was around the football.
Oh yeah, ball hawk, and he just looks like a Division 1 player. You pop on the tape, and it's like, okay,
Yep.
that guy can be a Big Ten linebacker. Absolutely.
And I'll say this too, for him and Dawson Merritt, both of those guys have that mentality you look for at the
Mm,
position too. A little different, Dawson's more of the a bit laid back, but very much like the film grinder, very much the IQ, very much on the understands what he's watching and kind of reads out plays. Christian Jones is a football player through and through, and all like uber prepared. Like this is a kid that's been on a meal plan, watches his nutrition, watches his
mhm,
meal plan, has a very regimented workout routine since like freshman year of high school. Like he's been
mhm,
on this plan for so long. He knows exactly what he wants to accomplish at the high school level. We talked so much about his recruitment when he waited to pick Nebraska because he was
mhm.
going through this process very thoroughly and felt that Nebraska was the best place to maximize his talent. I think he's going to have an opportunity to come in and really take over that room, not just because of his physical talent, but because of his mentality. Him and Dawson Merritt both, I think long term, Nebraska would love to keep those two paired up on the interior of Nebraska's defense, along the spine of Nebraska's defense for the foreseeable future.
And just thinking about, those two young guys coming into a room coached by Rob Dvorak, and we've already seen the development skills that Coach Dvorak has. I mean, it's been really fun to watch how much better John Bullock had gotten since, being moved from safety down to a Mike, and then also Javen Wright, who came to the program as a corner, moved to safety, moved to nickel, moved to inside linebacker, and he just kind of took it and just was transitioned well with that whole thing. So it was very, very, very fun to watch Rob Dvorak do his work, and it's fun to think about what those two guys, Christian Jones and Dawson Merritt, turn into at Nebraska.
For sure. A bit of a lightning round before we get out of here. We'll
Hmm.
start with Jeremiah Jones, who we talked about at the top of the show.
Yeah.
Missouri gave Nebraska a bit of a scare just a couple of weeks after announcing he was going to shut down his recruitment. The Garrett McGuire noise and some other things kind of like led to Missouri kind of making a late push. Nebraska, Matt Rhule specifically, went ahead and made the call at in the morning and reached out and did his best work to kind of keep Jeremiah Jones in the class and then kicked off his signing day press conference by announcing to everyone that
Yeah.
Jeremiah Jones is signed, which you had to feel good
Hmm.
if you're Matt Rhule. Jones is a guy that played everywhere in high school, played some
Hmm.
quarterback, played some running back, played some receiver, played some safety, played some linebacker. Like he's going to do everything. And he's coming into Nebraska originally as a receiver, legit 6'5". You and I both saw him multiple times on the sideline this fall. Just
Oh, he's
impressed
huge.
how big he is. He's every bit of 6'5",
Yeah.
really rangy limbs. Has that
He's not
opportunity to kind
skinny.
of. Oh
He is
yeah,
not skinny.
oh yeah, has that ability, to to
Uh-huh.
to stretch the field at receiver. I think his ceiling's personally higher at the defensive side of the ball, and I think one way or the other he finds his way to that side of the ball. But who knows? I'd like to see that size out there at receiver. He clearly can stretch the field. He can run routes. He can do those things. So I'm just excited to see what Nebraska does with him because he's such a Matt Rule recruit.
I totally understand him starting out at receiver. I totally understand him potentially growing into a tight end, but man, Tim, it does not, it just, I want him to like be out there as like the rover, if Nebraska, if they choose to stick with this defense and have that specific position, with 5 DBs back there, 2 corners, 2 safeties, and then a rover, nothing excites me more than the thought of Jeremiah Jones playing that rover spot. But I totally understand. He looks really good catching the football too, so I understand that.
For sure. Speaking of the rover spot, another in-state commit, Caden Vermas, who John
Yeah.
Butler believes has a chance to come in and contribute pretty early. We
Hmm.
loved what we saw from Vermas as a senior. Just completely, just fully in control of his athleticism. An elite athlete, legit 4.4 speed, legit verified track speed. Led his team in rushing. Also, contributed on the back end of the secondary. He's a physical tackler, willing to come in and contribute in the run game. I think he's going to have a chance to come in and compete for that rover spot pretty early. It reminds me a bit of Ramir Stewart with a little
Hmm.
more juice. Would remind some people around here of Isaac Gifford as well, with again a little more athleticism. Not as big as Gifford, but again of a better athlete in my opinion.
Yeah,
Um,
I wouldn't be surprised to see like season opener 2025 versus Cincinnati, Caden Vermas out there on the kickoff unit or the kickoff coverage unit, something like that, just to get him out there on some special teams to get his feet wet with college football, and then as the season progresses, we'll potentially start seeing him out there at either rover or safety.
For sure. Wanted to talk real quick about this O-line class that Nebraska put together.
Mm.
Julian Marks, the headliner, a late flip from Kansas, four-star offensive lineman who had offers from Oregon, Auburn, etc. Had the who's in that recruitment, but wanted to stay closer to home. Guy that started his high school career out on the defensive side of the ball, moved to
Hmm.
offensive tackle, still very much learning the position, but has the physical tools to be a really good offensive tackle. Legit 6'6", 300 pounds, light on his feet, excellent movement skills. Again, a developmental guy like a lot of these guys. Brian
Yeah.
Tapu, another one, 6'7" ish, 300 pounds, a guy that's again going to need some time. He's only played football for 2 seasons. Sean Hammerbeck, a guy that's played both sides of the ball, could also be a tight end. Also going to play, offensive tackle, would need some time to develop. But I want to close with Houston Quijana Torres, who
Oh
you and
yeah.
I are a big fan of the Polynesian influence this roster is getting. Quijana Torres, you watch his tape, and he's played primarily tackle at the high school level because of out of necessity. He's going to play center or guard at Nebraska.
Hmm.
Super light on his feet, really good hands, powerful frame, moves well. Like just an old school mauler with modern day athleticism at the center or at the interior O line spot.
I can't wait to see a second year or third year Houston Kayana Torres, because like when he like fully matures, that dude is gonna be a mean guy out there, and it's I think he's just gonna be he's a future starter, potentially all Big Ten caliber, and we've seen Tim, whether this means anything or not, but I like it when I see it. He's got that new artwork on his arm with the tattoos. I love that he's growing up and he's getting bigger and stronger, and he's just turning into a mean looking individual on the football field. I've talked to him on the phone. He's a very nice kid. But yeah, it's
This is a sweetheart, a sweetheart.
yeah, yeah, sure. But yeah, it just he looks like somebody, who could come in and potentially be the center of the future or a guard of the future, and you just run behind that guy because he, like you said, Tim, he's a mauler and he moves really well. Yeah, big one out on the islands. I'm sure Donovan Raiola is really gonna kind of hone in on him and really do his best developmental work with Houston Kayana Torres.
For sure. That'll probably do it for us here with our signing day show. We'll touch on a couple other commits here in the next coming weeks as we get through this off season, and we'll have some more football notes later this week as well. Appreciate y'all tuning in, and y'all have a good week. We'll catch y'all next week.